Hi there, my name's Anissa. At my sister's perfect glittering wedding, I was given a folding chair, shoved near the kitchen, tucked behind the clatter and steam. No seat at her table, no place in her celebration. I stayed silent that night, but not for long. What happens when you finally realize you were never meant to belong? Before we dive in, have you ever felt like the outsider in your own family? Let me know below. The heat clung to the air as I stepped out of my car, the late July sun pressing down like a heavy hand. I smoothed the wrinkles from my dress and tightened my grip on the carefully wrapped gift in my arms, a small token of congratulations I had labored over for weeks. The countryside venue was beautiful, string lights stretched between ancient oaks, linen tablecloths rippling in the light breeze. It looked exactly like the kind of wedding you see on Instagram, curated and perfect. I made my way to the welcome table. A young woman with a headset and clipboard glanced at me, barely masking her impatience. She skimmed the guest list, her finger pausing. "You're Anissa?" she asked, and before I could answer, she nodded toward the back patio. "We have a spot for you near the kitchen door." No smile, no warmth, just logistics. I followed the directions, weaving through clusters of smiling guests. Laughter floated on the breeze, bubbly, easy, not meant for me. When I reached my assigned seat, a folding chair squeezed into a corner behind a row of buffet tables. It took everything I had not to turn around and walk straight back to my car. The air smelled of roasting meat and something tangy, maybe lemon vinaigrette. Waitstaff buzzed in and out of the swinging doors, trays balanced on their shoulders, their polite apologies almost brushing my ears. I placed the gift under the chair, sat down carefully, and tried not to look like I was sinking. Maybe it was a mistake, I told myself. Maybe someone would notice and move me. But no one came. Across the courtyard, I spotted Shanda, my sister, radiant in her fitted white gown, and Skylar, her ever-present shadow, clinking glasses and tossing their hair like they lived inside a Hallmark movie. They didn't see me. Or if they did, they looked right through me. I tried to blend in, to become just another decoration. My skin prickled with every sideways glance, every pitying smile from strangers. I saw distant cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, laughing around tables closer to the dance floor. I even spotted my ex-boyfriend's new wife at one of the VIP tables, glowing under the fairy lights. I folded my napkin into tighter and tighter squares, my fingers moving mechanically. In the sound of clinking silverware and bursts of laughter, my heart thudded a lonely, offbeat rhythm. I caught myself forcing a smile whenever someone's gaze flickered past me. I stayed rooted in that chair because leaving felt like surrendering. I stayed because once upon a time I had believed family meant something. I stayed for Shanda. The first fracture came quietly, as fractures often do. A sharp internal whisper. If they don't even see me here, what am I doing staying invisible? Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the head caterer gesturing toward my section. A staff member, cheeks pink, approached me with a strained smile. "Excuse me, miss," he said, awkward. "Would you mind moving? We need to make room for a few late VIP guests." I blinked. Words clogged my throat. I had made myself small for them my whole life. Tonight, they wouldn't even offer me a seat. I stayed sitting for a while, pretending not to notice the staff shuffling around me, the plates clinking, the rush of busy footsteps brushing too close. Every so often, I'd glance toward the crowd, hoping for a familiar face, a kind smile, anything that might tether me back to the reason I had shown up in the first place. Instead, it was the catering manager who approached me. His voice was low, almost apologetic, as he leaned in and said, "Would you mind making space? We have a last-minute VIP guest arriving." I stared at him for a second too long, trying to decide if I had heard correctly, if maybe he meant someone else. But his eyes were kind and firm, and not really asking. I looked past him. Shanda saw the interaction, but made no move to intervene. Skylar caught my eye for a split second and gave a little shrug, a dismissive wave like shooing a fly away from her champagne flute. Without a word, I picked up my small purse and the gift still tucked under the folding chair and stood aside. My chair was quickly removed and replaced with a golden one, the kind meant for real guests, the kind with cushions. I wandered awkwardly near the edge of the crowd, pretending to check my phone, pretending it didn't hurt more than I thought it could. I could feel the judgment in the glances from a few guests, quick and curious, assessing me like an out-of-place centerpiece. No one offered me another seat. No one even offered me a glass of water. That's when the event planner, clipboard in hand, spotted me. "You're with the volunteers, right?" she asked, already halfway turning to point at a dessert table needing rearranging. I opened my mouth to correct her but stopped. What was the point? I nodded once, numbly. Skylar passed by just then, catching the moment, and without missing a beat tossed me a careless, almost gleeful instruction. "Fix the cupcakes, would you? They're lopsided." I moved toward the table, adjusting the plates and arranging the silverware with trembling fingers. A few guests watched. Some smiled as if I were part of the hired help. No one said thank you. The weight of a lifetime settled onto my shoulders. I remembered my own birthdays, setting up balloons while my parents fussed over Shanda's recitals. I remembered taking photos at my high school graduation because no one else had thought to bring a camera for me. Sweat trickled down my spine as I straightened the last of the napkins. Skylar laughed nearby, tossing her hair over her shoulder like the moment hadn't even happened, like I hadn't just been stripped of every last shred of dignity I had clung to for the sake of family. For a moment I stood frozen, hands flat against the linen, my heart hammering. I wasn't a guest. I wasn't family. I wasn't even a name on the list anymore. A voice inside me, quiet at first, started to grow louder. If they only see me when I'm useful, maybe it's time they don't see me at all. I glanced toward the exit again, not with longing this time, with decision. I didn't know it yet, but that was the last time I'd ever stand in a corner for them. I stayed close to the wall, a shadow among shadows, while the party drifted effortlessly into its next phase. Speeches would come soon. Bright, smiling, curated words to match the perfect photos being snapped under the twinkle of fairy lights. I watched clusters of guests laugh and reminisce, their voices a melody I recognized but no longer belonged to. Faces from my childhood blurred past. Neighbors, old friends of the family, people who once knew me when I was small enough to fit into their arms or their memories. Now, they moved around me like I was a piece of forgotten furniture. It wasn't just tonight. It was every birthday where Shanda's gifts took center stage while mine sat unopened. It was every graduation where I clutched my diploma behind the camera, capturing someone else's joy. It was Christmas mornings, crowded living rooms, all those times when I smiled so no one would notice how invisible I felt. Skylar's voice pierced through my haze. She flicked her wrist in my direction, lazy and imperious. "Could you straighten that tablecloth?" she called, just loud enough to ensure a few heads turned. Laughter bubbled near the dessert table. Someone nudged someone else. I moved without thinking, adjusting the fabric with trembling fingers. The world wobbled slightly, not from alcohol, I hadn't had a sip all night, but from the sudden crush of humiliation. I stepped back, hands stiff, trying to melt into the backdrop. No one thanked me. No one even paused. I drifted toward the folding chairs again, scanning for the small comfort of my seat, the one tether I had left. It had been shoved even further back now, half hidden behind a stack of unused catering supplies. My gift, carefully chosen, wrapped in simple cream paper and twine, was no longer tucked neatly under the table. It lay crooked on a side cart, slumped against a half-empty box of catering invoices, forgotten. I stared at it, something hollowing out inside me. It wasn't rage yet, not quite, just that low, familiar throb, the feeling of being unnecessary, surplus to requirements, a gesture offered and discarded. Maybe it wasn't personal, some soft voice inside me whispered. Maybe it was just logistics, like the catering manager said. Maybe... But another part of me, colder and older and far more tired, knew better. It wasn't about the folding chair. It wasn't about the tablecloth. It wasn't even about the gift. It was about always being the one who didn't matter enough to remember. I lingered, torn between pride and something smaller, something more desperate, the aching hope that one word, one glance, one touch could still fix it. Maybe if Shanda caught my eye, maybe if Skylar softened, maybe if someone, anyone noticed. But the evening blurred on without me. Glasses clinked, cameras flashed, laughter rose and fell, waves crashing on a shore I was no longer part of. Skylar clinked her champagne glass sharply, pulling the room's attention toward the dance floor, a signal for the next act, speeches, declarations, all the things I wouldn't be asked to be part of. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my gift again. The breeze caught it as someone passed too quickly, knocking it off the cart. It hit the ground with a soft, papery thud, unnoticed by anyone but me. Maybe it wasn't the first time they dropped me. It was just the first time I saw it happen. The night air cooled, but it didn't soothe the heat burning under my skin. String lights twisted around the trees like veins of gold, shimmering against the growing darkness. The official toasts began. Shandaw's voice rang out, followed by Skylar's high-pitched laughter, cutting through the clinking glasses and polite applause. I stayed at the edge of the crowd, invisible and deliberate, the folding chair a forgotten island behind the tables. My hands, resting in my lap, twisted the edge of my dress into a wrinkled knot. Skylar lifted her glass again, her voice carrying far too easily over the courtyard. "Here's to all the guests who brought meaningful gifts," she called out. Her words wrapped in honey, but laced with something sharper. The crowd laughed, a polite, confused murmur. Only a few caught the sideways glance she threw toward me, subtle enough that no one could call it out, but sharp enough to slice. The champagne in my glass bubbled against my tongue, bitter and burning. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile onto my face, a crumbling shield against the rising sting behind my eyes. I thought about the hours I spent choosing that gift. The way my hands had trembled while wrapping it. The little note I had tucked inside, one no one would ever read. My stomach twisted. I turned back toward the dessert table, pretending to admire the cupcakes I had helped arrange earlier, the ones now sitting slightly askew from the breeze. A few guests whispered, laughter rippling like a stone dropped into a still pond. Skylar and Shanda leaned into each other, laughing at some private joke, casually pushing aside another unopened gift box as if it were no more significant than the catering trash. I took a deep breath, the humid night pressing into my lungs. I rose quietly, gathering what little dignity I had left. Maybe if I left now, I could salvage the rest of myself. As I moved toward the gate, Skylar's voice called after me, bright and sharp like broken glass. "Don't worry, Anissa. Not everyone's cut out for a real party." Another wave of laughter chased after her words, sticking to my skin worse than the Alabama humidity. I didn't look back. I wouldn't give them that. My heels clicked against the gravel, each step heavier than the last, but also lighter somehow, like peeling off a skin I had outgrown. They didn't just forget me. They enjoyed forgetting me. The realization settled like a stone in my chest. It hurt, but it also clarified everything. The night air kissed my burning cheeks as I neared the parking lot. The smell of crushed grass and cheap perfume lingered in the air behind me, a reminder of the world I was leaving behind. Just as I reached the edge of the lot, a sudden roar of laughter erupted from the crowd, louder this time, unfiltered, unashamed. I froze for half a second, feeling something inside me tighten, not with sadness this time, but with something harder. You can't be humiliated if you stop playing their game. I didn't run to the car that night. I walked, each step heavier than the last, through the gravel lot lit by the thin shimmer of distant fairy lights. The laughter followed me, an ugly echo tangled in the cool air. Somewhere in the mass of glitter and linen behind me, Skylar's voice lifted again in a mock cheer, raising her glass like I was just another act in their endless celebration. The crunch of gravel beneath my shoes felt louder than the music. My palm, slick with sweat, slipped against the handle of my purse, but I tightened my grip. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me stumble. I slipped behind the wheel and sat there, engine silent, the headlights off. I stared at the perfect facade of the venue, the twinkle lights, the distant clinking of glass, the easy, effortless laughter, a whole world that spun on without me, just as it always had. I drove home on autopilot, the night swallowing my small car in its indifference. The next morning, my phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand. 5 missed calls, all from home. When I finally answered, it wasn't concern or kindness that greeted me. It was accusation. "Anissa, my mother snapped. Not even a hello. How could you? You embarrassed Shanda in front of everyone. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. You made her big day about you, she continued, voice sharp and rising. People noticed you leaving. Skylar said guests were asking questions. In the background, I caught the soft sobs of Shanda, perfectly timed, as if she knew I needed one more nail in the coffin. I closed my eyes. The knot in my stomach twisted tighter. You have no idea how much stress you've caused, my father chimed in, voice stern and disappointed. Sometimes, Anissa, you need to think about someone besides yourself. The call ended with a click, a final judgment rendered. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, feeling the familiar burn of injustice settle deep in my chest. The temptation to call back, to apologize just to make it stop, hovered close. It would have been easy to fall into the old rhythm, beg forgiveness, accept the blame, pretend it never happened. But this time, the weight of every other time bore down harder. The birthdays spent invisible, the graduations spent behind the lens, the celebrations where my name wasn't even whispered. Maybe love isn't supposed to feel like debt collection. Maybe family shouldn't be a chain you drag behind you, heavy with expectation and silence. Without thinking too much about it, I deleted the voicemail without saving it. I didn't listen to the others. I didn't need to. I already knew the script. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt clean. I crossed the room and picked up the wedding favor they had given every guest. A tiny bottle of honey wrapped in tulle and gold ribbon. I turned it over once in my hand, then dropped it into the trash without ceremony. If family was supposed to be unconditional, maybe they had never been my family at all. The morning light was thin and sour when the phone rang again. I stared at it from across the room, the caller ID flashing home like a warning. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mother's voice hit first, sharp and already mid-accusation. I hope you're happy, she snapped without preamble. Your little stunt has turned the whole family upside down. I leaned against the counter, feeling the cold press of it through the thin fabric of my shirt. It's not too late to apologize, she continued, her tone shifting into that brittle edge she always used when cornered. Shanda's devastated. You know how much stress she was under. Weddings are hard. You blew everything out of proportion. Father's voice floated in from somewhere behind her, muffled but clear enough. Always so sensitive, he said, like he was reciting a diagnosis he had given up trying to treat. The mechanical ticking of the kitchen clock grew louder in my ear, counting down every second I stayed on the line. I could have fought back. I could have laid it all out, every sleight of hand dismissal that had led to this moment. But what was the point? They weren't calling to listen. They were calling to preserve a story where I was the villain, because that story was easier to live with. I didn't say a word. I simply ended the call, the click of the button sharp in the stillness. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. Hi, is this Anissa? A chipper voice asked. I hesitated. Yes? This is Lily from Southern Blooms, just checking in. There's an outstanding balance from the Mason wedding. Since you were listed as the event liaison, we wanted to reach out to you first. Event liaison. The words felt almost comical. I pressed the bridge of my nose between two fingers and exhaled slowly. I'm afraid there's been a mistake, I said, my voice steady. You'll need to contact Shanda directly. A beat of silence, then a polite apology, and the line went dead. The satisfaction was small, almost petty, but it was real. Truth had a weight to it. It didn't need a parade or a shouting match, it just needed patience. I looked out the window at the cloudless Alabama sky, the world startlingly ordinary despite everything crumbling in my periphery. I thought about the wedding, about the folding chair, about the gift lying crumpled under a table, about the fake smiles and the louder-than-needed laughter. Maybe I didn't need to raise my voice to make an earthquake. For so long, I had measured my worth by how quietly I could endure, how tightly I could hold the family together with my silence. But silence wasn't loyalty. Silence wasn't love. Sometimes silence was complicity. I wasn't interested in playing that role anymore. My phone chimed again. Another vendor, another unpaid bill spiraling toward Shanda's perfect, curated world. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The cracks were widening, loud enough for everyone to hear. Sometimes silence speaks louder than betrayal ever could. The sun had barely dipped below the rooftops when my phone buzzed again, the screen flashing Shanda's name like a curse I couldn't shake. I considered letting it ring out, but something in me, curiosity maybe, compelled me to pick up. It wasn't an apology. "Anissa," Shanda's voice snapped, brittle and sharp. "I hope you're happy. Vendors are pulling out, guests are gossiping, you've ruined everything." I leaned against the cool edge of the counter, feeling its steadiness under my palm. "You couldn't just keep your head down for one night," she continued. "Your attitude, your drama, it poisoned everything." She painted the picture like a courtroom drama, positioning herself as the wounded, innocent victim and me as the architect of ruin. Projection, pure and practiced. The words rolled over me like cold water. No rage flared up. No defensive retorts rushed to my tongue. Only a strange, aching acceptance settled into my bones. She was never going to own any part of it. I ended the call without replying, my finger lingering for a breath too long over the end button before tapping it cleanly. I thought that would be the end of it for the night, but the universe wasn't done testing me. Not even an hour later, my phone rang again. Skylar's name lit the screen this time. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was sugary sweet, oozing concern. "Hey, Anissa," she cooed. "Look, I know things got complicated, but can't we just put this behind us? Shanda's really struggling. She's heartbroken over everything. We're all worried about the family's reputation, you know?" She laid it on thick, painting me as the saboteur, the unstable one, the petty sibling who couldn't just let a few things slide for the greater good. I listened, pacing the length of my tiny kitchen, the humid Alabama air pressing in from the cracked window. My fingers tapped a restless, angry beat on the counter. The guilt trap was so familiar it was almost comforting. Almost. But not this time. Peace bought by silence isn't peace. It's surrender. I let her words roll over me like water on stone, unmoved. After a few more minutes of pleading disguised as sweetness, Skylar's voice grew sharp, impatient, realizing her old tricks weren't landing. "Just think about it, okay?" she said finally, the fake warmth snapping like cheap plastic. "I have," I said quietly. Then I hung up. I sat down at the table, the dim light above humming gently. I opened a blank message. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, then typed steadily. "Tell Shanda, actions have consequences. I owe her nothing." I read it once, twice, feeling the weight of it. Not heavy but solid, like something built to last. I hesitated for the briefest heartbeat, and then I hit send. For the first time I chose myself, and I chose loudly. The late afternoon sun slanted across my living room, painting long bars of gold against the walls. I sat on the couch, staring at my phone as it buzzed again, each vibration a warning. I already knew who it was. Skylar. I swiped open the newest message. "If you don't back off," it read, "people are going to start hearing things about you too. Think carefully, Anissa. No more sweet tones, no more fake concern, just naked, clumsy threats." The screen glowed in my hand, its light harsh against the gathering dusk. I could almost taste the metallic tang of anger rising up, bitter and sharp, coating the back of my throat. They had pushed and pushed. They mistook my silence for weakness. Images flickered behind my eyes. Birthdays forgotten. Graduations where no one clapped. Years of swallowing every slight to keep the peace. I had folded myself small enough to fit into the corners of their lives, and still, somehow, I was too much. I set the phone down gently on the coffee table, refusing to let my hands shake. No fear. Not this time. Without ceremony, I deleted Skylar's messages. I didn't need them. I didn't need proof. I didn't need anything from them anymore. The gift still sat on my dining table, the one I had brought to the wedding. The cream paper was slightly wrinkled now, the twine a little frayed. I picked it up carefully, cradling it in my arms like something fragile, but no longer mine to carry. Outside, the sky stretched out in bruised purples and slow, fading pinks. I drove through town, the streets half empty, the world soft and humming in the heavy summer air. Every mile felt lighter, like shaking off invisible chains link by link. At the community donation center, I paused for a moment in the parking lot, the gift resting in my lap. I had made it with love. Not for approval, not for praise, just love. I walked inside and set it gently onto a donation table, surrounded by secondhand toys and slightly worn winter coats. The woman behind the counter smiled warmly, but said nothing. She didn't need to. I didn't leave my name. I didn't need anyone to know. I didn't need to be seen anymore to believe I existed. As I drove away, windows down, the sticky warmth of the Alabama evening wrapped around me like a familiar, forgiving embrace. I felt it then, a shift so small it barely registered at first. The lifting of something I hadn't realized I'd been carrying. A burden I had mistaken for loyalty. A debt I had mistaken for love. I didn't look back. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying their weight. I was carrying only myself. The air inside the donation center was warm and slightly dusty, carrying the scent of old books and laundered clothes. Sunlight poured in through tall windows, cutting across the floor in golden sheets. I stepped inside quietly, the wrapped gift cradled in my arms like something sacred, something ready to be set free. There were a few people browsing, the kind who smiled with their eyes but kept their heads low. At the far end of the room, a woman behind the counter looked up and nodded once. No questions asked. No demands. Just permission. I approached a table stacked with donated toys and gently placed the gift down among them. For a moment, my fingers lingered on the twine bow, the final act of letting go catching me harder than I expected. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a little girl, no older than 6, her shoes scuffed and her dress too big for her tiny frame. She edged closer to the table, her eyes wide with wonder. Hesitant hands reached out, brushing against the cream paper as if it might disappear if she touched it too quickly. The coordinator gave her a small nod of encouragement. I knelt, smiling, and pushed the package a little closer. "It's yours if you want it," I said softly. Her whole face lit up, a beam of pure, unfiltered joy that hit me harder than any insult or slight ever had. Maybe the love I poured into them wasn't wasted. It just found a better home. As I stood and made my way back to the door, 1,000 memories flickered through me like pages torn from an old journal. Birthdays spent wrapping gifts for people who forgot mine. Celebrations where I stood at the edge of photos, unnoticed. All those moments I had mistaken as signs to try harder, love deeper, stay quieter. They weren't lessons, they were warnings. Outside, the sun had begun its slow descent, painting the world in honeyed gold and deepening shadows. I climbed into my car, rolling down the windows to let the warm breeze swirl around me. The road ahead stretched long and open, unmarred by expectations or invisible weights. Healing, I realized, isn't about getting back what you lost. It's about understanding what you never owed in the first place. The scar would remain. I wasn't naive enough to believe otherwise. It would tug and ache when I stumbled across old memories, hear certain songs, see a dress that looked like the one Skylar wore that night. But a scar was not an open wound. It was a record of survival, not a sign of weakness. As I pulled into the driveway of my small apartment, I noticed the flower vendor setting up across the street. Without thinking, I crossed over, buying a simple bouquet of fresh daisies and lavender. Something bright. Something just for me. Inside, I filled a glass vase and set it in the center of my kitchen table. No card, no note, no audience, just life, blooming quietly. Some scars don't disappear, but they don't have to stay open either. Maybe healing isn't about forgetting the people who hurt you. It's about remembering yourself. For so long, I believed love meant staying silent, staying small. But the truth is, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away without looking back. You don't owe anyone your dignity. You don't owe anyone your silence. And you don't have to stay where you are merely tolerated instead of celebrated. I wonder, have you ever had to choose yourself over the people who said they loved you? How did it change you? I would love to hear your story. If this video touched your heart, leave a comment with 1 inch or tell me where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with it, let me know why. Your thoughts matter too. If you enjoyed this story and want more healing journeys, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and join our community. Your next chapter could start here.